Right, let's dive into this explainer. So, if you've been following the news lately, you've probably seen those massive, super reassuring headlines declaring that the Strait of Hormuz is officially back open for business. On the surface, it really looks like the crisis has been totally averted. But today, we're going to contrast those triumphant political headlines with the hidden, incredibly tense logistical nightmare that's literally lurking just beneath the surface of the water. Because as you'll see, the fine print tells a completely different and, frankly, much more dangerous story. So on April 17th, we get these coordinated public announcements from both Iranian and U.S. officials stating that the strait was open. And global markets, they reacted almost instantly. It was like this massive sigh of relief just washed over the entire energy sector, and boom, oil drops $10 a barrel. To a casual observer, or, a trader staring at a terminal, that $10 drop was just mathematical confirmation that the supply chain was fully secure again. I mean, we saw these triumphant public declarations everywhere, just like this widely shared quote declaring the waterway completely open and ready for business. Politicians across the spectrum, international leaders, everyone was just eager to project stability, right? And it created this massive wave of optimism that the crisis was 100% over and that normal pre-war commercial shipping was resuming right that second. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. Behind closed doors, way away from all that media spin, the Pentagon was actually giving Congress a very stark reality check. They admitted that actually clearing those Iranian mines from the strait, well, that could take up to 6 full months. 6 months. Keep in mind, we're talking about a strait that carries roughly 20% of the world's global oil supply. So you gotta ask yourself, how can a waterway be completely open if the military literally says it's gonna take half a year just to make it safe?
Which brings us to part one, beneath the surface and the tech gap we're dealing with.
To really grasp this 6-month timeline, you have to look at the weapons themselves. Iran didn't just close Hormuz with a bunch of missiles or a quick blockade of fast boats. The IRGC Navy mined it. And they didn't just toss out a few rusty World War II relics either. They deployed highly sophisticated modern weapons. We're talking tethered and floating sea mines, but more importantly, modern influence mines. These are weapons that just sit silently in the water, specifically engineered to detect the unique magnetic signatures and acoustic patterns of massive commercial ships driving past. They are designed for one specific reason, to make a waterway entirely unusable long after the actual shooting stop. And this right here perfectly illustrates the massive bottleneck we're facing, the really severe limitations of current U.S. mine clearing technology. Mine clearance is already one of the slowest, most agonizingly dangerous military operations in existence. But right now, the U.S. mine countermeasures fleet is relying heavily on aging Avenger-class ships. We are literally talking about wooden-hulled vessels designed back in the 1980s. For decades, the Navy has been trying to replace them with the littoral combat ship, the LCS Mine Countermeasures Module. But that program, it's been famously plagued by extensive delays and repeated technological failures. So America's mine warfare capability is, by the admission of its own naval analysts, just completely inadequate for a major rapid clearance operation. Let's look at Section 2, the economic gatekeeper, maritime insurance. Because of all these uncleared mines, shipowners are incredibly hesitant to actually transit the strait. One shipping analyst basically hit the nail on the head, calling it a game of who goes first. Nobody wants to be the test case. And more importantly, Lloyd's of London and the other major maritime insurers have absolutely not dropped their war risk premiums down from crisis rates. This brings us to a really fundamental rule of global trade. The global shipping industry runs entirely on insurance. It absolutely does not matter what politicians declare on social media or what foreign ministers announce at a press conference if the shipping industry's insurers refuse to cover vessels navigating through the area at normal rates. Until the actuaries in London actually feel the water is physically safe, the strait isn't economically open, period.
Okay, Section 3, the asymmetric advantage, why it's cheap to mine but wildly expensive to clear. When you actually map this dynamic out, the asymmetric military advantage created by modern sea mines is just staggering. Look at this stark contrast. On one hand, laying the mines requires maybe a few covert fast boats operating in the dead of night. It takes mere hours, and it's incredibly cheap. But on the other side, clearing those exact same mines requires deploying specialized, aging fleets, unmanned underwater vehicles, and highly vulnerable human dive teams. It takes weeks, sometimes months, and it is exponentially more expensive and dangerous.
The brutal math of this asymmetry leads to one totally undeniable conclusion. Iran retains the ability to lay new mines significantly faster than the U.S. and its allies can sweep them. Iran doesn't need to match the US in stealth fighters or aircraft carriers here. They only need a fleet of cheap, fast boats, a deep stockpile of sea mines, and the patience to maintain their leverage. And, well, all intelligence suggests they have plenty of all three.
Moving to Section 4, the actual timeline. Let's map out the reality of this clearance.
Look, even under the most wildly optimistic scenarios, where absolutely everything goes perfectly with those 1980s Avenger-class ships and the dive teams, full mine clearance requires 8 to 14 weeks of continuous, non-stop operations. But the realistic scenario, the one that accounts for bad weather, equipment limitations, and active Iranian interference, that pushes the timeline out to 16 to 24 weeks. That right there is the 4 to 6 month window the Pentagon was quietly warning Congress about.
And remember, during this entire agonizingly slow half-year process, every single commercial ship that does decide to transit the strait is accepting a massive existential risk, because the cost of a single mistake is catastrophic. If just one influence mine strikes a fully laden, very large crude carrier, the strait closes again instantly. Oil immediately spikes right back above $100 a barrel. And honestly, worst of all for the military planners, the entire clearance timeline resets back to zero. So bringing this all together, we really have to ask the ultimate question. If we look past the political theater, past the artificially dropping oil prices, and just look at the brutal logistics, what is the actual, physical state of the Strait of Hormuz today?
The stark reality is that it is not open in any traditional sense of the word. It is, at best, conditionally navigatable under strict Iranian supervision. As of right now, commercial ships can only pass if they agree to follow specific Iran-approved corridors. They literally have to accept Iranian oversight of their transit, all while navigating waters that everyone knows might still hold active, highly sophisticated mines. That is the crucial fine print that the headlines completely missed. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought. If the insurance markets and the military clearance timelines are telling us that the Strait won't truly return to normal pre-war commercial traffic levels until well into 2026, how are both of these militaries actually using this prolonged, incredibly tense waiting period? Are they really just sweeping for mines, or are they preparing for what comes next? Think about that for a bit, and we'll see you in the next explainer.